Hi, today's guest is Daniel Oberes. He's the head of operations at Snappr, which is a visual content marketplace providing photography and related services for all kinds of consumers as well as businesses of all sizes. Let's get right into it. Daniel, how's it going?
Yeah, having fun. Thanks for having me, Ben.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I want to open with a question here about your personal experience and your personal CX journey. Is there something when you were kind of going on the beginning of this where you felt was really mysterious or really surprising to you?
Yeah. So a little bit about my background. So I started out as a customer service agent, way back in the dot-com boom, and eventually I ended up in a technical support role,
Hmm.
um, and it was at a company that was later acquired by BA and then Oracle. It was basically an enterprise business.
Hmm.
And I was a curious dude, and I was trying to figure out what to do next. And one of the bits of advice that I got from a sales leader was get closer to revenue.
Mm.
Um, and I think this is a bit of feedback that I give to a lot of folks, like trying to figure out their way in tech, and especially if they come from a support background. Um, I felt like knowing and having domain expertise was the what I needed to do, right? So I just figure things out and I share my knowledge, and things will work out.
Hmm.
But that really didn't have the outsized impact I was going for, and so I had to figure out like what does the business care about. So really, with going in a revenue focus became the challenge for me. But coming from support, I didn't know exactly how to do that. Um,
Right.
so I basically chased a lot of different things. One was like kind of program management, right? So like, okay, how can I become an expert in something and then own it, and then I have a better relationship with the revenue owner. Another approach that I took was um, going into sales engineering, right? So like I worked at a company where basically everyone was in a generalist support function. And I saw an opportunity to say, hey, like instead of being specialists or generalists, can we think about post sales versus pre sales? And then
Mm.
I kind of created a pre sales function kind of early in my career. So I'm like, all right, cool. Now I have to be able to engage with decision makers at a critical part of the relationship. Then I'm like, oh, okay, there is a way to engage with customers. So I basically went on a sales journey, but like from the perspective of knowing and executing and building systems. So that was kind of my journey.
Awesome. Yeah, I think when you're talking about sales, they're usually coming at it from the other side where they are more focused on, the individual in the target business or the individual end consumer, and they're not as familiar kind of at their core about the product or the service.
Oh
And
yeah,
that kind of comes secondary for them.
yeah,
Whereas the opposite side for support almost, they
yeah.
get very familiar with the product and then bring that knowledge to the customer. Would you agree with that, or how do you think about that mix?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So I think the best salespeople, have a lot of familiarity with the products, in terms of, but it's at a different level of elevation, right? And it's most of the time it is, and very much in line with what I would want for a support or customer experience leader to be able to do is like, what can we make a commitment on, right? Because a
Right.
salesperson is basically putting their reputation on the line, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And then other folks need to rally around and make sure that we can make good on their commitments. And so that's where kind of the level of elevation kind of goes down into like the nuts and bolts and what's happening in the background and behind the curtain.
Hmm. Hmm.
So at its best, a salesperson knows what we can deliver on with a level of certainty.
Right.
And that's what I need to provide for my service team, right? I need to make good on that certainty. So that's where we have to that's where all the work of I think customer experience operations comes in. Like, okay, can I maintain that level of certainty?
Right. You don't want to overpromise, underdeliver.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. One of the themes that I think is really key in support and thinking about the future, as people who've done this, I myself have done
Mhm.
frontline customer service rep work before as well,
Yep.
and we know intuitively that service and support contribute to revenue growth, but it's much easier to measure the cost,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
this much for headcount, this much for tools. All right, you're done measuring, right? Um, what's one opportunity that you see to connect service with revenue?
Yeah. I think a an easy one and a risky one is like um, basically the different sides of like net revenue, right?
Hmm.
Retention, right? It's like, is the customer spending above their commitment in some way,
Mm,
right? Are they expanding? Are they growing? Or are we losing customers because of our service delivery? Um,
mm,
so, and you could I've been, also like a customer success manager or account manager and owned renewals, right?
sure.
And, that role needs to, kind of be the translator of like what was sold and then can we deliver and then kind of be the internal advocate and all that kind of stuff. So like, which is kind of a funky role, really like, thinking about it. Um, but I think that's a pretty clear way. Are they spending more? And a customer isn't going to spend more on an ongoing basis unless you're able to meet your commitments.
Sure.
And on the flip side, if it gets so down below, you'll lose them.
Right.
Those are kind of metrics that we pay attention to. But I'm not, at least in terms of the services side, I'm not holding them specifically accountable to it. I need to have lots of like leading indicators
Hmm.
um, to do that, but I have to align that with other sales leaders in the business. Like, all right, cool. If this is all looking green for these portions of our customers, then our expectation is we're going to get more revenue, right? So I think alignment with our stakeholders for things like who are our pilot customers, who are our red accounts, who are our top priorities, and keeping that kind of machine humming, and everyone
Hmm.
knows how to operate at a appropriate level for our tiers and priorities is super important. I know this is all basic stuff, but I have about like 8 teams that I'm trying to keep going, right? And I could say as the executive for a function, like, yeah, when I what I say goes, but as soon as you roll it out to hundreds of people, that translation doesn't always happen. So that's where a lot of the work happens.
Absolutely, yeah, and I think that's one of the things that you mentioned before the call, before the podcast started. Basically, there's these different levels of service, these different tiers that you have. There's different sizes of organizations. I believe at Snappr you also have kind of end user individual customers.
Yeah, yeah.
How do you think about bringing these themes together? Right, you have these different levels of service, obviously depending on the contract value, the type of customer. You've also got this idea of driving revenue, right? And so
Yep,
obviously if it's a bigger value customer, you have more depth to that relationship, and then you have more information, most likely to to not only to track data but also to take initiative on. How do you
yep.
think about that mix?
Yeah, it's not clean. It's like not a
Mm,
clean thing, right? And some of it is like the DNA of the business and where you came from and where you're going and so just a little more context on the current business that I'm in. Snappr, the way to think about it is um it's like the Uber for photography, right? And so when we started, it's basically a matching service for
mhm,
consumers, right? Like you have a wedding coming up, or you
mhm,
want to have like pumpkin patch pictures or whatever, right? Like, oh, perfect, right? I don't need to do all the research. I don't have to go to the websites. I just get the people I want, right? And then our turn to enterprise is like, who has the big run rate demands for images,
Mm,
right? So it'll be like marketplaces, right? So like car dealerships or real estate, for example, right?
sure.
So those are very different needs, and there's like some things in the middle where it's like where we don't have a direct relationship with like a big business, but like we'll have lots of different um, like it'll be like a family practice of like I don't know hospitals or something or clinics, right? And so like we just have to
Mhm.
do all that repeat business. So the history of the business kind of went through all of that, and in a lot of ways, the individual consumer and some of the SMB stuff was a feeder into the rest of our business, right? Like so,
I
like
see.
we backed into some of this enterprise success, and then we
Mhm.
created a lot of the marketing and demand and all and services and like then sales team on top, right? So kind of like yeah, basically we backed into it. Like we didn't need like a big sales team in order
I
to
see.
accomplish that.
So it came
So
organically from people using it themselves, and then they said, "Hey, I would like to use this at my company as well," kind of thing.
and then we had to build a product that would facilitate a better customer experience for
Mhm.
that need, right? Like
Right, right.
you don't want individuals like you don't want like somebody that's going through hundreds of bookings to go through the same process and like how do you submit a job and all this other kind of stuff. So then we had to create a lot of specialization in terms of roles, at least initially, how to do that. So hopefully I'm not losing track like in terms of the story, but basically um, a lot of the growth has been organic, and then we got very intentional about it.
Mm,
In terms of like tying out the revenue side of it, also not clean. So right, like the consumer business, like it doesn't have the same like I both have like transactional revenue that I need to be able to maintain, and
mhm,
then contracts, right, with at different sizes of contracts and renewals,
mhm, mhm.
and different levels of commit. But I can't let the consumer side of the house, just because it's transactional, fall off. Again, that's a feeder
Of
for the
course.
rest of the business.
Right.
So I have to maintain service levels and efficiency so that like your first experience with us, which should be through low friction kind of experience, has to be high. And then
Right.
once we get into the um, work, what we call work, I'm sorry, the enterprise side of the house, workflows. That needs to be a very different kind of process where you're introducing things like, basically an entire life cycle, right? You go through a
Mhm.
pilot, you have success criteria, we sign off, then there's a handoff in terms of like level of tiering, and then we communicate SLAs. For me, I have to make sure that, and then one of the struggles I also have is the choppiness of enterprise sales cycle and the demand that comes from it, and then the
Mhm.
linearity of consumer demand. So
Right.
you have to,
Right.
you have to balance all of that stuff out. So the challenges I end up having are how predictable is our forecasting in terms of sales?
Mm.
How is our marketing spend going to be in line with what we've seen in the past? And we have to do all of those adjustments. So it is it's a challenge. It is definitely a challenge to get that level of forecasting consistency and, kind of balancing that all that stuff out. But like, you know, I think those are the kind of problems I should be dealing with at this level, and it's kind of the fun stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's meaty, isn't it? It's significant. I think, the um, you you mentioned a few times this idea that, these things kind of developed organically,
Hmm.
um, and that it's a little bit messy on the way up, and you're kind of figuring things out as you go.
Yeah.
Um, and you started to get real serious about measurement and all those things. I think, if you talk about like more of an account management kind of role or customer
Mm.
success side of things, B2B, um, the relationship is there, and I think in some sense the tools are there also for measurement and kind of handling that. But
Yep.
on the B2C side, um, traditionally there hasn't been, you don't really use like the CRM tools to the same degree.
Right.
You don't really have the same kind of tooling that connects service and sales
Right.
and service and revenue in particular, right? And
Yes.
so I think that's the part where I think people are kind
Mm.
of struggling a little bit, or maybe looking for opportunities. Is there some thinking you have around that, and maybe the metrics or the tools that you use on the B2C
Yeah.
side?
So if we were to just pull out you're saying pull out the enterprise side of the business and just like straight consumer side, right? Like if we got rid of it. The way I think about that, if is again, you're not talking about net revenue retention and all that kind of stuff. It's repeat business. Um,
Mm,
that's the way I think about it. And it's a version of revenue growth, and it's a version of commitment, but it's repeat business. And then, so if I'm able to communicate and deliver services effectively, then we have a predicted return rate and then a repeat business rate. And so, like, I got to get that number up, and then I also need to get it in faster, right?
got it.
So it's both repeat rate and velocity.
That makes sense. That makes sense. Okay.
But that ends up being more at a model level relative to the volume that we have, and then you're like, all
Mhm.
right, cool. Is the model working well?
That makes sense. Um, one of the things that I think is really common is this tension between data-driven decisions
Hmm.
and maintaining a human touch.
Oh yeah,
And I think that some businesses will tend to lean more on one side or the other. Some teams might lean more on one side or the other. How do you think about this balance between, okay, I need to hit my metrics, trying to improve this number,
hmm.
versus, you know, maybe sometimes a longer interaction, if you're talking about transactional support, for example, maybe transactional isn't the best word,
Sure, sure.
consumer support, but maybe a longer interaction isn't necessarily better according to metrics, but
Yeah,
if you have a chance to really go deep and make a great, a great relationship with somebody, that can be a net positive for the business. I think we understand this, but how do you kind of handle that tension?
yeah. So you're thinking like, um, with numbers, depending on how you define your metrics or what metrics you choose, you could really focus on efficiency
Hmm.
for the business, and then not um, kind of create the customer experience that we want. Is that basically where we're going?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I think the and definitely had to deal with that problem, right? Like, there's not like an abstract thing. I think anyone that's working in some kind of customer experience role has to wrestle with that.
Hmm. Hmm.
So my take is you have to have a very you have to have a clearly stated perspective of what good customer experience is, right? And then you have to have metrics that actually encourage it. So, for example, and I think I've spoken about this before in other interviews. It's like we had a average resolution time metric,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And that's a great metric, right? Right. So it's like the faster you resolve it, that means that you've solved someone's problem fast, and everyone wants their problems solved quickly. Um, but what was underneath was a what a customer would have send an email, right? And they might have two or three questions, and then that thing turned into three or four different incidents, and then we solved one, and then we solved another, and then that ticket went to another person, and then would ticket another to another person, and then all get solved at different times. But we got some of them solved really quickly, and the customer's like, wait, why are you closing this? I'm still talking to you, right?
Mm,
And then, oh, like, oh, this other they close that ticket, I'm working on this ticket, right? So um we we solve the problem in the wrong way. um
mm,
and so the I was willing to sacrifice this metric that we had, which was average resolution time, for customer satisfaction. And so the philosophy I had was customer satisfaction is the metric that we need to
Mm,
go for. And then it's
got it.
our job to make sure that we are efficient at it. Right. And so I made, instead of it being kind of like, customer satisfaction, kind of a parallel metric, we increased the weight on customer satisfaction. And then we had other metrics that would drive both um, efficiency of the business and customer, and then drive resolution time, but didn't make resolution time the focus, right? Because it encouraged the wrong behaviors. I cleaned up the process, and then obviously we did all that kind of stuff, right? Like don't split it up, right? But then we had to kind of build all that out. So our focus then became responsiveness. And so our average resolution time went up, but our CSAT went to kind of world class levels, which I'm very very proud of. Um, and then, but we saw because our baselines weren't correct, like we were kind of, our capacity was off and responsiveness kind of like floated all around. So I like, okay, responsiveness needs to be the thing that drives efficiency internally. And
Mm,
it helps the rest of the business too, right? Like if you're fast, you basically help everyone else, and then that turns into the productivity number.
right.
So I kind of adjusted the unit of measure, um, and then just kind of focused on velocity. So uh, I, I sacrificed what I consider now to be like a vanity metric.
Right, right. I think the vanity metric trap is all too easy to fall into.
Yeah,
And I think exactly what you're saying, that's so powerful to have a clear definition of success, a definition of the outcome you want to have in qualitative language. You know, you describe it and then you say, okay, this is our priority metric. And yes, we're going to sacrifice this other one a little bit. We're going to put this CSAT score up at the top and say, you know, how can we drive that initially? And then kind of digging into like second and third, okay, yeah, we can improve efficiency here now that we've got our priorities straight. Um,
yeah. Because I could have just
that's
focused on speed first, right, and just like
right.
and kept banging the drum, right?
And we've seen, you know, as consumers, as individuals that deal, you know, on the consumer side with businesses, you know, you can say some of the classic targets would probably be like banks or insurance companies. Maybe you could put healthcare in that bucket, or maybe an airline. You know, there's some businesses that feel like they've put that efficiency metric way too high, and
Yep,
customer
yep,
satisfaction is suffering. Um, and you know, as consumers, we feel this, you know, in our interactions with these businesses. Um, you know, and some are better than others, obviously.
sure, sure.
But every time you have that delightful experience where you're very satisfied, or you know somebody's kind of gone above and beyond for you, you know, obviously you have a positive feeling. You have more trust in that business. You're, you know, all the things that will probably drive revenue for that company. Um,
And
and
it also has an impact on the internal teams, right? Like they feel better, right? Like they're
sure,
doing natural things that they want to do, right? So
right,
it's not just from a customer perspective, right? Like people that go into customer support and technical support, those people like by nature want to help people. So
right,
like they, like so in my mind, like, also having been in support, like I want to be proud of the things that I'm doing when I'm talking to
sure,
a person. I want to feel like my goal is to make sure that they're happy. And obviously I need to do it in an efficient way, but like the goal of efficiency isn't making me do unnatural things, right? Like the goal is I'm helping somebody.
absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and I totally agree. I think this, you know, this kind of responsibility is a filter essentially for people that want to be helpful, right? That want to help
Yeah.
out and want to do some good. Um, so I wanted to connect this a little bit with one of the things again we mentioned before the podcast, but this idea of communicating across departments,
Mm,
communicating to leadership. How do you kind of make the case for these things? Maybe you have to shift priorities, or maybe you have to say that
mm,
we really need to focus on this metric. Um,
mm,
when you think about kind of advocating for the service function, advocating for support, advocating for a better CSAT score,
mhm.
and you want to bring that to leadership, what are some of the kind of techniques, or what are the things you found that are effective for that?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges I had because I initially started in this at this company, I was only responsible for the support function and an inbound sales team, and then the enablement and L&D teams
Hmm.
associated with that, right? So, but like again, support is like the tail end of it, right? And then sales team is at the beginning of it, and then all of the work to make sure that it was effective, like that we were delivering on the service, wasn't mine, right? So I was just like,
Mm,
oh, hard problem to
right.
solve. I would work with my partners and other parts of the organization, like, oh, we don't have enough supply. So then, like we can't get enough of the bookings completed, or the photographers that we have didn't show up. So what am I supposed to do? Then I have to do refunds. And so I hold the back refunds, but I can't actually, pull the levers.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, so it was definitely a challenge. So I would have to communicate like, here are the buckets of problems that we have, right? And then you're talking to another leader, and they're like, okay, fine, support guy, like, I have to keep my machine running, and I'm gonna go, right?
Right.
But I think eventually, the level of kind of maturity that I built into the team, and the trust and the pride and all of that was a was a big win for the business, right? Again, like the thing that we were talking about, like if we focus on the customer's experience and the internal team feels what that is, that's kind of like that's a vibe, that's culture building, right? And then you're like, it's a winning culture. And so eventually I was given the reins to basically all other parts of the business in terms of both managing the supply, and then service delivery. So like all together. So I know I'm kind of skipping. I'm like, oh, just get promoted. But and then the real story, I think, is when you're trying to solve for support, and became very crystallized for me, because um, again, it's the tail end, and I could only fix so much from the tail end. And so what I needed is to do is to basically make it so that I don't have support issues, right? Like that's what we should be doing as a business,
Mm,
right? I
yep.
could make the team more efficient, but really, and I could make sure that they're like top notch in terms of the responses, but like at the end of the day, you don't want tickets, right? Like you don't
Right.
want like I have a world-class support team for a dysfunctional company. Like, so
Mm,
I gotta like go as far upstream as possible. And so that means kind of making the case for what does the customer experience need to be, but at a company level. And I can't solve all of those things at once. So I have to kind of build the machine. I'm like, hey, look, I'm accountable for all of these things. I
mm,
have that humming as far as I can have it humming, but here's the ceiling, and this is what you guys want, and I can't. Like, I literally cannot move higher than that. So, for example, um, the supply problem. And so I have two things that I need to do. I need to make sure that I have enough people to complete the bookings, and when the customer wants it, they can get it, right? We have that humming. The other side of it is sometimes the photographers that we have um, don't show up. And
mm,
so, like, what do I do? And so we had, a algorithm that was really focused on points, right? And all of that. But it was like cumulative. So like when you're at the top, you stay at the top. And what that kind of does is it doesn't create an incentive for you to be reliable. Because like
mm,
I've already accumulated my points. Like just keep feeding me, right? So we had to go through. I'm like, all right, but I'm feeling all the pain of that at the tail end, and it's impacting revenue, and I have all of these refunds. What am I supposed to do? So I'm like, okay, this has revenue impact in that I'm causing refunds because we don't have a reliable supply. So I had to go all the way up. I'm like, what's our matching algorithm like? How do we block? How do we ban? And then those numbers start, then we have all of the other issues of reliability impact my ability to deliver. Like, so if a photographer is late, and they don't deliver their images, then we have an SLA. The clock starts. Like it doesn't matter when it's like when the booking ends, right? They shot the shots. We have an SLA. Clock starts. We might that person might not upload those images for a day or two. And we're like, I have to deliver this in 12 hours. And I have a limited amount of resources. So I'm like, okay, reliability is going to have all of these downstream impacts. So, um, and because I have a way of measuring refunds and the portion of refunds that come from this, and the portion of the supply that is managing this, and then I have the means to say, if I get rid of somebody, I'm responsible, and then we could know what the protocol is to either bring them back or recruit, then the risk of doing this is lower, right? So I
Mm.
can't just say, "Hey, guys, solve this problem," and then not also have a solution to the detrimental impact of some of this stuff, right? Because nothing's ever clean, so I have to balance that out. So I had an easier time because I own all of it, but the mechanics would be the same. So refunds are bad. That's probably the biggest signal that um, even if our customer satisfaction is high, if a customer is asking for a refund, that's the worst experience, right? So like we should
Definitely.
pay a disproportionate amount of attention to that, and also has revenue, just like an impact on the business, right? So
Absolutely.
how can I go upstream? Then I guess that's another way that you could talk about like pointing to the impact is like reducing refunds is probably
Mm.
another going back to an earlier part of our conversation. So let me just maybe summarize because that was kind of a winding conversation. Basically, I got a revenue oriented metric that support was feeling. And then I had to figure out how do I go upstream? How do I reduce the impact of it? And then how do I offset the problem of, again, reducing it because I'm going to ban somebody, for example.
Sure.
Um, then again, have a solution for it. Because when you do something like this and you have to make the case for it, and if you don't hold the bag for all of it, then it'd be like, yeah, nice idea, Daniel. But what about this? I'm like, okay, then we have to have a protocol for it. So I had to build lots of different like protocols to make sure that we could manage the risk. But normal kind of if I were to use a tool, and I did use this tool, it's basic gap analysis, right? Here's the thing that we
Mhm.
want to be able to do. Here's
Mhm.
the
Mhm.
gap. Here's the risk, and here's the capabilities that we need to do. Do we all
Mm.
agree? And here's how we would measure based on like the capabilities. With these capabilities, we will be able to measure these impacts, and I could steer. So you have to. Some people you need to pitch with gap analysis. Some people you need to pitch with the numbers, and then on the floor, you have to like get everyone caught up on the vision, and then whenever someone is talking about it, everyone's saying the same thing. So like, yeah, we could pull it off. So there's a lot of internal salesmanship to
Mhm.
do something like this.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes getting too fancy and too polished um, is not going to be received well. You have to you have to play the you have to do a little bit of theater of hey, we thought about this together, and like look at this great idea that we had together, which is likely true. And I'm not trying to say I'm the person that came up with all of the ideas. Typically, when I ask the team how do we fix it, they already know, and I have to present it to all of our different stakeholders, and some people want to be involved in the decision making process, and sometimes it doesn't match up with the amount of thinking that's already been in there. So it's a lot of sales work.
Yeah, thank you. I think you've covered so many great things here, and I want to pick up on a few things. One is the idea of internal salesmanship, and I
Mm,
think that there's really a skill there that's not a default skill for a lot of people working in service support in the customer
mhm.
experience space. Unless you're coming from the sales side, you're not necessarily going to be naturally focused on that or naturally comfortable with that. But I think
Yeah,
the skill of internal salesmanship is really a big one. And it's something that people can develop, right? Whatever their starting
right.
point is. And of course, knowing your organization, knowing the leaders that you're talking to, what are they going to kind of respond well to? if somebody's really numbers focused, or if somebody's maybe more story driven.
Yep.
The gap analysis, another great tool that you mentioned, another great technique. Um, yeah, I think all those kind of things. And one of the things that I've been thinking about, and I maybe you can riff off of this, but
Yep.
um, the idea of amplifying the voice of the customer,
Yep.
right? So if you're trying to go upstream, right, support is on the tail end. You're trying to solve something in the middle of the business, so to speak. Um, and saying, "Look, this is not my opinion. This is what our customers are telling
Oh
us.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Here,
totally.
here's a quote. Here's some data. This is what's actually happening on the front
Mm,
lines. This is what the business actually feels like for customers, right? And here's how
yeah,
I've measured it and quantified it. Again, and pulling out quotes, or using the keywords the customers are using. If you have a really clear metric like refunds or something, it's like it's
yeah.
clearly affecting revenue. How do you kind of think about VOC and bringing that into the conversation?
I feel like voice of the customer is kind of like, and I'm maybe this is a little aspirational, but like it should be the daily currency, right? Like that's kind of like
Mm,
it's not like a special NPS thing, or do we need to have an anecdote or whatever. It should be like the way that we talk in the business. And even with a gap analysis, there's a home for it. So when I did like the gap analysis, you do business requirements and then capabilities, and then eventually, what I do is I translate that into a roadmap. The roadmap is going to be, the idea is, here's the overall mission that we have, like, month over month or quarter over quarter, right? And here's the things in the gap analysis. I'm going to spread that out over whatever period of time, right? And then at the bottom of that, I turn in, like I have little portions of it is like, how are we going to feel about this internally, right? Like what is the sentiment of the team? And what is the sentiment of our customers or our stakeholders, right? So like what are they going to be saying, and like this is because they are saying this, and then the outcome will be, for example, if they want, do it again, selling internally, um, you know Snappr is going to be the first choice when I'm thinking about blah, right? Like that is what I want them to feel. And then at that point, I'm not, my selling is like, hey, do you want them to feel this way? Right? Or like, oh, you do want them to feel this way, and this is how we're going to get them to feel this way, and this is the commitment that I'm going to make in order to do that, and that's how I'm going to measure it.
mm,
So even for like a frameworky abstract thing like a gap analysis, there's a place for internal and external emotion to get in there, and then like you're like, oh, of course you want it. Then the story isn't the dry capability stuff, because I also don't want everyone in the mix. Like I don't like, this is my machine. I'm running it. I'm telling you what I'm going to do. I'm not asking for permission, but you want this, right? So like it's going to take 3 months for me to get there. The way that we're going to hold the line is this, this, and this. And like if I'm not delivering on that feeling, because a lot of times when you're getting into a debate with another exec or whatever, they're not going to be like, you missed that milestone, right? They're going to be like, you didn't deliver on this feeling that you said the customer was going to feel. I have to
mm.
make up for that gap, right? So I have to be able to say like, hey, right, like this is what you want, right? And then the conversation is like, oh, Daniel understands what I need as a salesperson or whatever, right? And I'm like, oh, then we could have that conversation. And Daniel has done all of his homework, and he knows he's going to get here to here to here, and we'll measure it. And he's already taken me on this journey, and he's telling me when we're going to meet on this. And but like selling externally and internally is the same. Like you're putting your reputation on the line, and
Mhm.
you communicate that you hear them and you see them. And even in the most abstract kind of frame, you you need to you need to kind of put your neck out and your kind of vulnerability. Like, I want to feel this, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, and Daniel, I can really appreciate the level of skill that you have with internal salesmanship. Just listening to the way that you talk about this, I think, you said something like, you want customers to feel this way, right? So you're confirming, this is an internal conversation, right? But you're confirming what this person wants. And you're saying, "Hey, you want this, right? Here's how we're going to get that. Here's how you are going to get what you want." So you're putting yourself in their shoes, and it's really a sales technique essentially. And it's a really
Yeah,
powerful one because, people are thinking about their own interests and their own goals and motivations. And I think that if you're maybe not as versed in the sales techniques, you might be thinking more from your own side of things. This is
yeah,
what I want. This is what I want to do. This is why. But if it's always phrased, any initiative you're trying to do, it's always phrased in terms of, hey, this is what you want, isn't it?
yeah.
Right?
And
Um,
the numbers sometimes they don't translate, right? Because if you say
mm,
like, "Oh, I'm gonna hit blah 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 SLA," or "I'm gonna hit X level of support," their thought is like, "Oh, of course. Like, why not? Like, what's getting in the way? Why aren't you already doing this?" Or I know how you got that number before, right? And then it becomes like, "Show me your homework." And I'm like, "No, no, 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 no. I'm telling you how we want them to feel. Like, isn't this right?" And like that's like kind of the thing that we could connect on, and it'll be our own truth, and then we will be able to prove it. Because but if you start with some metric, then it becomes the thing to poke holes into.
I
um
see. If you go to the data too quickly,
yeah.
that makes sense. Um, we've already gone over on time. It's been a great
Mhm.
conversation.
Sure.
I would love to ask you one more question. Is it okay if we go a little bit
Yeah, yeah,
longer?
yeah.
Okay, great. Um, Changing gears a little bit here. Um, when you think about the future of CX, when you're in a leadership position, you've got a lot of experience, you've seen a lot of different tools, you've worked in a lot of different functions, different kinds of customers. I think you've got a great perspective. When you think about the future, obviously the AI wave is massive.
Yep.
How do you think about the mix of tooling, the mix of service channels, and how do you think
Mm.
about the future of this kind of the CX offerings that are available?
Yeah. I don't think this is like a super like hot take. But I feel like um well, the AI thing, I think there's lots of different ways that could play out. I think there's a long way to go with making that work. I think it could add some efficiency, but like again, like you need some discernment and decision making, and probably um, also a lot of risk in that,
Sure.
depending on how
Yeah,
you roll it out and how operationally savvy you are. But I
absolutely.
think that's totally a manageable thing, and a good source of um, efficiency. I think a bigger change is um, again this weird mix that I'm in of like consumer and enterprise, and I think there's lots of businesses that kind of do that kind of coverage,
Mhm.
and the experience, the transactional mode is kind of muddy, right? You do like, pay as you go, or you have contract. And if you're in the platform and you do kind of a trial experience, what is our engagement model and all of that? And so I think, the whole SaaS model, right? We're like moving from on-prem to SaaS was a big transition.
Absolutely.
I think the consumer-ish PL, product-led growth motion for an enterprise style business is like still kind of wonky,
Mm,
and consistent. So I think um, basically customer experience goes all the way to the beginning, right? Like, or like when you're during the sales process, right? Because like you're already exposed to the product, right? And so you need to support it before you sell it, and make sure that that experience is right. So I think customer experience as a discipline, is and like things like customer journey like become not nice to haves, right? Um,
mm,
and like working in a B2B, kind of SaaS businesses, having someone focus on customer experience was kind of like a fancy or thing. But I don't think you could. I don't think it's a fancy thing. I think it's just kind of like when you roll something out, you need to be considering customer experience, like and what the engagement model is, and the engagement model for post sales in enterprise SaaS doesn't line up, right? Like you can't throw out the SWAT team, right, for something you haven't sold yet.
Right.
With when the barrier to entry is so low. So like you kind of need to have like all of the scale kind of be able to be blended. So I think customer experience is going to be fun. Kind of you're going to have to be able to scale your engagement level and your priorities and SLAs with the right levels of folks. Um, and so I think there's going to be a mix of like growth growth marketing and SDRs and support. Like that kind of mix is going to get funky and all munched up.
What is an
And
SDR?
SDR, sales
Oh,
development.
SDR. Sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
So yeah, so I think those kinds of things will kind of all kind of because those folks are like, oh, they're a customer, but you need to transition them from a trial to a full customer, right? So like,
Hmm.
is that a
Hmm.
customer or not? Right?
Mm.
Um, so I think, the PLG and enterprise motion is going to create a lot of uh, different types of customer experiences and engagement models and tooling and metrics. Yeah, yeah. I think that's kind of the fun stuff.
Got it. Great. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Before I wrap up here, is there anything that you'd like to shout out, or is there anything that you would like to draw attention to? Is there any topics or themes that you think people should dig into? Maybe some areas
Mm.
that people should be learning about?
Yeah, I think if you're a customer support person, I think one of the things you probably heard from this is like go as far upstream as possible. And I think there's like the sales portion of it, which is like kind of the first leg of my journey. And I think go further upstream. Um,
Hmm.
involve yourself in product and marketing and communicating what the ICP is, how effective are we at servicing it. So like go to market stuff, new product introduction. And it's not just, oh, we're going to turn it into documentation. No, like represent the customers, say what the impacts are, and again, like prevent issues from coming up. So yeah, use voice of the customer as far upstream as possible.
Awesome. Thank you, Daniel. It's been a pleasure talking to you. That's
Yeah.
all for this episode of the CX Files. Catch us next time, and see you there. Bye.
Thanks, Ben. See ya.